I would say that brainwashing, it can't happen overnight. It can't happen in 4 years. The fact that we have essentially alternating terms between the parties, there's no way to systematically establish something
You're
within
right.
4 years.
You're right. It would take sending somebody to K through 12 education and then to college to get them brainwashed. We don't have anything like that in this country.
This debate is a prime example of why Charlie Kirk dominates college campuses. He shreds through leftist narratives with cold, hard facts. Here he takes on a self-proclaimed moderate who, like many students, has absorbed the very brainwashing Kirk exposes. Watch as he dismantles the illusion of free thought in higher education and draws bold parallels between modern leftist tactics and Soviet-style suppression.
All right. Yeah, sorry. Tulsi had to go to another battleground state. We're dividing and conquering, so you have to deal with me, okay? You have to just deal with me. All right? Yes. Hello. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you? Oh, all right. So I have a question about the name of the tour. Could you tell me what you mean by brainwashing?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally on college campuses, you are being brainwashed, and by brainwashing, you don't allow dissident ideas, different perspectives or worldviews, and typically on campuses, you'll learn some of the worst, most parasitic ideas imaginable. So,
Well, even so, I would argue that brainwashing is a little bit of a harsh term. My parents lived in the Soviet Union. My grandparents lived in the Soviet Union. My great-grandparents narrowly avoided.
Campuses are very similar to what's happened in the Soviet Union.
They are not.
Well, so let me ask you a question. On most campuses, is this kind of discourse invited and allowed? In most of your campuses, would you say that if you are a conservative, do you get graded fairly?
Yeah.
Do you guys get graded fairly? Raise your... That's Soviet-style intimidation, right? Disagree, punishment.
That's not Soviet-style intimidation. You know what Soviet-style intimidation is?
Well, the next step would be like, I don't know, calling the whole country garbage.
Yes, Charlie Kirk is absolutely right to challenge this. The left loves to dismiss conservative concerns as overblown, while conveniently ignoring the very real political persecution happening in this country. He brings receipts. Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, Douglas Mackey, all targeted for daring to challenge the establishment. If that's not Soviet-style intimidation, what is?
Half the country garbage?
That's not what the Soviets did. Are conservatives getting sent to gulags?
Well, actually, Steve Bannon went to federal prison. Peter Navarro went to federal prison. Donald Trump faced 700 years in federal prison. There are 280 January 6th pretrial prisoners right now for nonviolent offenses right now. And by the way, those are like similar to gulags, awful conditions. So it's actually, this country is much more like the Soviet Union than you might actually lead to believe. Right?
No, I mean, okay, sure. You have a couple examples of some people who, high-profile conservatives who were sent to federal prison.
I can keep on going, by the way. Douglas Mackey went to jail for making a meme. Do you know who Douglas Mackey is? You might not.
No, I don't.
Douglas Mackey went to federal prison. Is going to federal prison for making a meme in the 2016 election. We don't respect freedom of speech anymore. We don't respect dissident voices. And by the way, don't take my word for it. This is why Elon Musk and Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard have left the Democrat Party, and they say the Democrat Party is a party of Soviets and a party of totalitarians. So it's not just Charlie Kirk saying this; it's former Democrats. And yes, of course, the Soviet was a more extreme version of it, but that's where we are headed. We're a country where if you have certain politics, you have a higher likelihood of going to jail.
Well, let me ask you something. In order for, I would say that brainwashing, it can't happen overnight. It can't happen in 4 years. The fact that we have essentially alternating terms between the parties, there's no way to systematically establish something within 4 years.
You're right. It would take sending somebody to K through 12 education and then to college to get them brainwashed. We don't have anything like that in this country.
And there it is. Charlie Kirk exposing the real pipeline of ideological programming. The left isn't just pushing radical ideas in college. They start in kindergarten. Kids are taught to hate their country, see history through a Marxist lens, and reject any sense of national pride. If that's not brainwashing, what is?
What happens in K through 12? What happens in
In most public schools in this state across the country, you're told to hate the country. You're told that America's systemically racist. You're not taught who Thomas Jefferson is, or James Madison, or John Jay, or the Federalist Papers.
Well, that's simply false. Name a school where they don't tell you who Thomas Jefferson is.
Do you think they teach Thomas Jefferson as a hero or a villain in most public schools across the South?
Who would you say Thomas Jefferson is?
Well, I mean, Thomas Jefferson was America's third president and the author of the Declaration of Independence and an American hero.
Is there a gray area? There must be a gray area. You can't say, oh, he's definitively a hero or he's definitively
Well,
a
actually,
villain.
I mean, hold on. Yes, of course he did things that were bad, but he helped found the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. That's pretty heroic.
So would you say that you have to? Would you say that you?
But yes, of course, you mentioned the things he did wrong, but in history, you must understand people in the context of the times of which they live. And the context of the time of which he lived was widespread. He actually released the slaves at the end of his life, and that's one example of many, by the way. But the point is this, is that the emphasis on trying to get a generation to hate the country has become largely brainwashing.
Back to Thomas Jefferson. You say that it's based on the norms of the time period. What were there norms in the late 1700s, early 1800s that would have allowed rape of a slave? Sally
Okay,
Hemings?
First of all, that's never been proven. I don't want to go too deep down the Thomas Jefferson hole, but let's just kind of go. What Thomas Jefferson did is he gave you a free society that your parents liked so much that they left the Soviet Union and came to. Thank you, Thomas Jefferson. That's probably worthy of hero
Well,
status.
I'm not
yeah?
saying that he's entirely a villain either. I'm saying that there's a gray area, and you say, "Oh, well, do they teach him as a hero or a villain?" It doesn't matter.
But
Do they
everyone,
teach him as-
no, hold on. First of all, they don't. Just so we're clear, they are removing any reference to Thomas Jefferson in curriculum as if he's anything good at all. They say that he shouldn't even be considered as someone worthy. Monticello is now littered with slave references, saying that Thomas Jefferson was this awful person.
Well, of course it's littered with slave references. Of course, Monticello, you can't just erase the part of
We're
history
not
that you
talking
don't
about-
like.
No, erase or emphasize. You see, when we emphasize over people's heroic accomplishments, what you're doing is you're diluting the triumph of their contribution to the society.
Exactly. Charlie Kirk highlights how history is being rewritten to serve an agenda. Instead of presenting figures like Thomas Jefferson as complex individuals, the left wants to reduce them to one-dimensional villains. They don't teach history. They weaponize it.
Right? And so, okay, yeah, happy to mention it. But can you also mention that a lot of people in history owned slaves, and very few of them started the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world? And by the way, every society has owned slaves up into America, but America started the end of slavery, thanks to people like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, John Jay, etc. So what is brainwashing? Brainwashing is not letting the other side of the story be told. And I have a serious question. Do you think most college kids, maybe at this campus, yes, could even tell me the preamble to the Declaration of Independence?
No.
Okay. Do you think that they can name, how many articles of the Constitution are there?
5.
7. No, it's not Trivial Pursuit, right? But I mean, the point is that most people don't know anything about their country. They know nothing about their country. Okay? Yet they know a lot about how America's systemically racist, and they know a lot about how like trans people are like being marginalized, and they can like repeat that climate change is an existential threat to America.
Well, repeating that,
humanity.
repeating one sentence is different from repeating the preamble of a constitution. Do you have the constitution memorized?
Well, pretty close.
Pretty close. Well, let me ask you something. Does memorizing the preamble?
No,
of
not
the
memorize. I said first of all, I said the Declaration, but that's a separate issue. But
No,
the point is that
No, you didn't.
I'm pretty well, okay. Fine, I can do both if you want me to do both. When
Well,
the
I don't
forcing
want you
events
to
comes
recite it to me,
necessary
I'm just
for
asking.
one people to dissolve the political bands that have tied them to another, driving from the equate station, driving the power that. You want me to keep going or
No,
like?
you're good.
Okay, God, thank you. But yes, so again, this is not Trivial Pursuit. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the point is this: our education system de-emphasizes the brilliance of America. It makes you feel ashamed to be an American patriot. It prioritizes the most rubbish line of thinking on these parasitic mind ideas, which is involved in brainwashing. Exhibit A, everybody around you thinks they're graded differently because they're conservative. And that is using force to not allow dissident opinions, which is a Soviet tactic. It is totalitarian in nature, right?
Well, in that phrasing, yes, but
Okay, so maybe
I would say
maybe
that-
maybe people are being brainwashed. Let me ask a question on the audience. If you guys spoke out with the Trump hat in class, do you think you'd be graded differently or down?
graded by whom? What do y'all mean by that?
So these are your classmates telling you that they can't wear a hat of someone who probably will become president, hopefully on Tuesday, and was president once again, and that they will be kicked out of libraries, graded differently. That's a Soviet country.
That's not a Soviet country.
No, it's a Soviet-like country. In the Soviet Union, if you were to wear a hat of a dissident, they would disappear you. And now
Are they getting disappeared?
Well,
or
I mean,
just told they can't
well, no,
go in
this-
the library?
This is the hold on. That's a that's an int. That's a, by the way,
No, I
exactly.
understand. I'm
that's
just
an
saying that
introductory
that's
step. What you're saying is you're cheapening down what is now the gateway drug to Soviet totalitarian. Oh, it's okay. They can't go to the library. Oh,
well,
it's okay.
I'm
you're
not saying that. I'm
No,
just
no,
saying that you're falsely equivalent.
No, it's not equivalent. There are gradations of it. Of course, we are not yet at the Stalinistic level of Soviet Europe, but we are closer to that than people would ever realize. Where you can't wear this hat right here in a class without some teacher grading you down, without somebody calling you a terrible name or fearing for your safety. That's not a free society. And that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is doing so well, because we're going to take this country back.
This debate perfectly illustrates why Charlie Kirk continues to trigger the left and expose their hypocrisy. The modern college experience isn't about learning. It's about indoctrination. Kirk doesn't just call it out, he obliterates it. The real question is, how much longer will conservatives tolerate this intellectual suppression before taking action?